Welcome to Apricot Tree Academy's Dyslexia Awareness Month podcast series. This October, we're sharing real stories from parents, educators, and advocates whose lives have been shaped by dyslexia. We are here to share stories with families everywhere about how dyslexia is not a limitation. It's a difference in how the brain learns, and with the right tools, support, and understanding, every child can succeed. We're so glad you're here to listen, learn, and stand with us in spreading awareness and hope for all children with dyslexia.
All right. Well, welcome back to our Dyslexia Awareness Month podcast series. In each episode, we're sharing the voices and stories of people whose lives have been shaped by dyslexia, parents, children, and advocates. Today's guest never set out to be an advocate, but life had other plans. 9 years ago, when her youngest daughter came home from school in tears, believing she was stupid because she couldn't read, everything changed. That moment launched her into a journey of learning, advocacy, and leadership in the dyslexia community. Since then, she's helped found the Texas Dyslexia Coalition, worked alongside her daughter to testify before lawmakers, and celebrated the passage of House Bill 3928, ensuring better support for dyslexic students in Texas. She and her daughter also accepted the City of Houston's proclamation of Dyslexia Awareness Day, and she continues to raise awareness so more children get the help that they need. Currently, she collaborates with the Texas branches of the International Dyslexia Association to change the way teachers are trained to teach reading. And just this year, she was elected to her local school board, where she's committed to improving services for dyslexic students. She may call herself an accidental advocate, but her impact has been anything but accidental. Please welcome Jennifer Highland to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
So, Jennifer, I'm really excited we get a chance to talk with you today because of all the work you've done. But first, could you share how you first became involved with dyslexia advocacy?
Yes. So I was like most people, and I had never heard the word dyslexia in my life. I did not know that there was such a thing. I knew that some kids struggled with reading and others didn't seem to. And my two older children had a completely normal kindergarten and on year and read easily, and I didn't have to think about it very much. And so when my daughter came along, I noticed some signs early, but I didn't understand what they were. And that's really one of the biggest things I hear from parents is when you look back, you realize, oh, I was seeing that all along, but I didn't know what it meant. And she went through kindergarten and a lot of her work was coming home with sad faces on it. But I just thought, maybe like she's struggling with her schoolmates or, the teacher's not a great fit. We went to public school in first grade. They knew coming in that she was behind, and so they gave her extra help. And she always stayed behind. She still continued to improve, but she never caught up to her peers. But I kept being told, it's okay, she'll catch up. She'll catch up. She just needs more time. Like so many other parents have been told. And I believed it because, again, I had no experience. So I got to second grade. We had a great teacher. They had a great rapport with each other, and they enjoyed each other, and she was blossoming. And all of a sudden, one day, she came home off the bus and said, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, nobody likes me. And I could tell her face was puffy and red. She'd been crying for who knows how long. And I immediately said, what happened at school today? And got on the phone with the teacher, and the teacher said, call the assistant principal. And so that was my intro. Was my kid came home from school one day broken. And I do tell people that I didn't know at that time, sorry, that's when I changed as a mom. And I did not know that that was going to be the start of my advocacy journey. But when your child is so broken that they hate themselves, it changes you as a mother, and it changes what lengths you're willing to go to. So, I dug in very hard, and I Did as much research as I could. We were very fortunate that the school got us tested and diagnosed and started services. But I still had to understand it to feel comfortable with it. And I came to realize later they knew sooner. But like most people, we were put off until it couldn't be avoided anymore. And unfortunately for my child, it came in that difficult form of completely, hating yourself because you think you're not good enough. So it was a rough start. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, that sounds that is really such a raw and like powerful beginning to your story. And I thank you for sharing that, because we hear from a lot of parents, that they can share, they can sympathize with your story and understand
Yeah.
that feeling of not knowing what's going on. So thank you for sharing that. Once you discovered that it was dyslexia, what did you do to further learn about it? Like, what kinds of avenues did you take?
Well, I think fortunately, the district mentioned to me that they had a parents group that was going to start meeting the next month, and they invited me to go. And what really happened was I showed up, and all the parents were angry and yelling at the administrators because their children were not getting tested, and they knew there was a problem and why we had to wait 3 years. So I just quietly sat back down with it only took us a month to get diagnosed story, and just kind of listened. And it was alarming to me, though, to hear those parents' stories and that their kids had struggled for so long. Um, and so, from there, I bought all the books. I went on the internet and I tried to look at Facebook groups, and, they all recommend, certain books. Of course, Sally Shaywitz is the number one recommended book. The Gift of Dyslexia was recommended, things like that. We can talk more about why I don't think dyslexia is a gift later. And so I really just dug in and did as much research as I could because I needed to understand what she was going through. And I will tell you and your listeners, when you get to this point, the number one thing that I did for understanding was they called it a dyslexia for a day. It was a 2-hour seminar, and I cried the entire 2 hours because I finally realized how hard school was for my child and how hard homework was for my child. And all those nights that I sat there and said, just write one more sentence. Come on, we're almost done. I was asking so much of her that I had no idea. And there was a lot of mom guilt there, but it really helped me become a more understanding person. And again, like grow that desire to help children, who struggle with this, because this is still so misunderstood and it really shouldn't be. There's no excuse. There's tons of information out there. There's just not enough sharing of knowledge.
Thank you. So where did you find that simulation for those who might want to look into something like that?
So actually, the one I did was done through my school district. They offer it twice a year, but I know for a fact that Dyslexia Training Institute offers that training. They are based out of San Diego, but they are online. And when we were stuck at home during COVID and couldn't get some of those, the stuff we needed, we actually did Zooms with Dyslexia Training Institute and were able to continue getting services, which was fantastic. I didn't even realize how fantastic their services were going to be for what my daughter needed in particular. She grew leaps and bounds during COVID, which most people just, wasted away. So we were fortunate, but I appreciate everything that they do for kids with dyslexia.
That's funny that you bring up the Dyslexia Training Institute. That's actually where I got my certification.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
I did not know that. This was not planned.
Yeah, total connection. Isn't that funny? I think our worlds, I think all of this dyslexia moms' worlds are connected. When you're talking about Sally Shaywitz's book, my first book I read too on it, there's just there are so many connections, but I think we don't find those connections. We feel really alone for a long time.
Yeah,
Don't find
because the
connection.
school can't tell you who else has dyslexia, so you don't know the other moms. So that's where the next phase of my journey came in was a friend that was in these. So we got put on a district dyslexia panel. I can't remember the name of it exactly, but we would meet quarterly and we would talk about ways to improve dyslexia services and ways we could identify more dyslexics, and the school district would do nothing about it. And so it felt kind of fruitless, but I came out of there with some good relationships. And one of the ladies started I say neighborhood Facebook group, but a district Facebook group. And it's called Empowering Dyslexia for Spring Branch, Houston. And it's members only. It's, we prefer that people live in the district. I did kick all the administrators out when I took over because I wanted parents to be able to ask questions freely and not worry that their principal was going to see it or the teacher was going to see it or anything like that. And so when she moved away, she passed that group on to me. And that's kind of where all of my real advocacy started, because now that I'm the admin, people start reaching out like, hey, somebody told me that you could help me with XYZ. And so that was a real point of growth for me. And that's where I got hooked up with the Texas Dyslexia Coalition.
I was just going to ask you about that next, actually. So tell us about the Dyslexia or the Texas Dyslexia Coalition. How did that group come together and what role did you play?
Well, so I actually came in after the beginning. It was a group of moms up in Highland Park, Texas. They called themselves the Kitchen Table Moms. I have to make sure I give them that shout out. And they, were all moms of dyslexics struggling to get services in Texas schools. And here's something that, your listeners may or may not know. This is why this Texas Dyslexia Coalition came about, was because despite the passage of federal IDEA law decades ago, Texas was still using 504 law to administer dyslexia. We were the only state in the country, and we were being fined $17 million a year for not following federal law. So instead of changing our ways, we continued to persist. And so this group of moms said, we're going to make them change. And so they came up with a plan. They got some legislators on board. They wrote a bill. They contacted me and said, hey, would your group want to sign on? And I said, well, I don't know what you're talking about, because I'd only known 504. And so I, again, had to do a lot of learning, had to catch up real quickly. But that was in 2021. And my daughter and I joined up with them and would go to Austin and go to the legislative, the committee hearings. And we went and knocked on office doors, but we didn't testify that year. That was, we were getting our feet wet. We got pretty far, but then when we got to the Senate floor, which of course was the last step, the bill's sponsor decided to change the bill to a study. So that was a little disappointing. We left pretty unhappy. But we left with a resolve to come back and do it again. And because of all the connections that we had made, we found a really strong bill sponsor. And I can talk about him later if you want to know more, but he came to all of those. He was on the education committee. He came and listened, and he's dyslexic himself. And he told the kids, he said, you inspired me to stop hiding my dyslexia and talk about it. And so when we came back in 2023, he said, that's my bill. Like, I want to carry that bill. And he fought hard for it. And the kids fought hard for it. My daughter got a truancy notice from the school because we went so many times to Austin to advocate for this. And, she testified in front of the Public Education Committee, which she told me was very intimidating because there was a lot of men in suits sitting up high above you. And, you feel like a little small person down there. And she testified in front of the Senate Education Committee. And, the goal there was, to make the legislators understand what a struggle, having dyslexia had been for our kids. And try and encourage them to make this change so that the future would be brighter for other kids. And every office that we visited, every legislator we talked to, all the kids acknowledged, this will not help me. This is helping other kids. I know how hard it was. I don't want other kids to have to do this. And that was kind of a cool, proud mom moment, for us, because our kids really understood the true meaning of what we were doing there.
I want to know who
I
the.
didn't know all of that story. Oh, sorry, Cindy, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I went on for a long time. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was actually curious who the sponsor was.
So Steve Toth is his name, Representative Steve Toth. And he's been there for a while. He's actually now running for U.S. Congress, which I mean, of course, I think he'll do an awesome job no matter where he is. But he was very open with the kids. And the second time we came around in 2023 when he was the sponsor, he could not have been more fantastic. I mean, his office was our hangout when we were up there, like between going to visit the offices. He had the kids come up for a pizza party one night, before we were set to go around the next day. And he just really poured a lot into those kids and made them feel like they mattered and they were making a difference. And that was pretty important. It's hard when you're a kid to try and like go talk to these adults and, tell them, I know better than you.
Well, I think it's amazing, especially how courageous she was being. But also, I was just thinking about the truancy you mentioned. What an educational experience for her, though, and for those kids involved. I mean, I can't even imagine what their future is going to hold with that kind of empowerment under their belt.
And it's funny because none of the teachers complained. I emailed all of our teachers before and I said, I'm sorry, my daughter's going to miss tomorrow because we're going up to the Capitol. And they would always be like, all right, go get him. They understood, they knew. And she actually did get the history award that year. I don't know if it's connected, but it may be.
Well, I love about that story too is that it kind of shows how, I think our dyslexic children get, they feel, stupid was one of the words that you used earlier.
I'm sorry. I know that's a bad word. I'm sorry.
I know. Well, I've heard it from some of my own kids, so I understand. And they feel like they're not as good as their peers or they can't do the same things. And I love that this story shows that they can do amazing things. They can change laws. And they did change laws. So I love that. I love that story. I didn't know all of this. So we haven't been in Texas long enough to know that they were all still on 504s. I had no idea.
And it's been kind of a big deal because the system is not set up to handle the influx of kids now on IEPs. And it's been hard for the school districts. And I do not turn a blind eye to that. I totally get that. But it's because the state had put off doing this for so long, that we were so far behind and needed so much to transition all these kids over. So.
Yeah, and the difference between an IEP and a 504 is very significant. So that's a lot. Let's not go into the differences right now because I spend hours on that. That's a lot. Okay, so you are also working with the Texas Collective Impact to change how teachers are trained in reading instruction. Can you tell us a little bit more about that initiative?
Yes. So a couple of years ago, I think it was also in 2023, it been early. No, it was 2019. The state mandated that all in-service teachers for K through 3 take the Texas Reading Academies. And while that is very appreciated, it falls far short of what teachers need in order to provide effective reading instruction, in our opinions. And most of the colleges and universities and I know teacher preparation programs extend past college and university. But what we're focusing on is the college and university level. They are not teaching structured literacy and how to teach structured literacy. Now, there's a couple of things that are involved in that. The professors don't know how to teach them how to teach. So that's a problem. But also, they're just, because of that, they're not getting the proper instruction. So when they come out, they have, to take the Texas Reading Academies, and then they have a little bit of knowledge, but it doesn't matter how fantastic the curriculum is we put in somebody's hands. If they don't know what they're doing with it, we're not going to get any better results. And so what has happened is the Dallas International Dyslexia Association, the Houston International Dyslexia Association, and the Austin branch have all come together to form the Texas Collective Impact. And so what they're pushing, and IDA's overall push has been towards structured literacy this year. And these three groups have decided they want to make a change in Texas, and they want to get Texas colleges and universities to implement appropriate teacher instruction so that when these teachers come out, they're ready to teach structured literacy to our kids. And of course, we know with dyslexics that it's essential that they have this structured literacy. And what most people are finally coming to know is that all children will benefit from having structured literacy. And so it really is a win-win for everyone if we get this changed. The other fun fact is that in 2023, Texas House passed HB 1605, which banned 3Qing at the elementary or in teacher teaching it, and it also banned universities from teaching 3Qing to their pre-service teachers. So we feel like this is the perfect time to jump in here with trying to change the way the colleges and universities are doing this. We do have an example at the University of Central Arkansas. They have put this into motion and they've been doing this. And so we are using their model, and we had our first conference this past June, trying to get this word out to colleges and like the professors, but also like the deans of the education department, trying to, make them aware of the benefits of getting this IDA accreditation in their programming, because then they'll produce better teachers. So we're working very hard on that, and I feel like we're making big strides. We've got plans for another symposium this spring, and it'll be at the University of Texas this time. We were at the University of Houston last year, and we've got professors from these schools on board that are working with us, and so we just want to keep growing this push to change the way literacy is done at the college level.
I think that's an awesome effort. Having gone through my own teacher education courses when I first started as a teacher in an elementary school, they didn't teach me to teach reading. So I understand the need for that. The fact that I was taught to be an educator and then didn't even know how to help my own kid is kind of a sad.
And myself in that same boat. Yeah, my sister's in that same boat. She came out of college. They gave her a curriculum and said, "Here you go." And she's like, "Oh, okay, I'll figure this out." And, she's a fantastic teacher. I mean, she was so wonderful, but you can't do what you don't know. And she had a real awakening and a difficult time when Solda's story came out. And she, listened and heard, and she had so much guilt because she's like, I failed so many children. And I'm like, you did not. Like, you did the only thing you knew how to do. You did your very best. And I don't want teachers to get lost in this conversation, because they're such an integral part, and we have to take care of them too. We have to make sure that they have everything they need. If we're throwing them out to the wolves, that's not doing anybody any good, especially the teachers.
So just so our listeners know, Sold a Story was a podcast that came out, podcast series that talked about how reading education in America was failing our students at the time, or some of the reading instruction, and talked about what is good education and what is not. So Cindy, do you think we could link that in our show notes so that people can take a look at that if they want to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, okay, so we'll link that so you guys can listen to it if you want to. I listened to it too. I felt the teacher guilt as well. I totally understand that. But yeah, I think you're right. We just didn't know better. We were taught something different. So anyway, that's really interesting. Okay. Sorry, for our next question. So I think you covered a lot of our questions in your last.
Sorry, I've been talking a lot. Yeah.
No, you're fine. We like hearing the story, but what other changes have you seen through your advocacy and community involvement?
That's a tough one. So in terms of dyslexia, so one of the things I will say as a dyslexia mom, as we talked about before, we learn what our children need to learn how to read. And we kind of all end up in the same place after we go through the dyslexia. We end up at literacy. And so I have a group of moms in my district, and we call ourselves the literacy ladies. And we spent a lot of time advocating for an improved reading curriculum in our district. My district was, of course, a Lucy Calkins district, like many in the country. And, my boys went through, they managed okay, as we know that, a certain percentage of kids will learn to read no matter what instruction that they're given. But, my daughter was the one who just, fell off the cliff. Well, all these moms were dyslexia moms. They all had similar experiences with their children struggling and having to do the work themselves to get their kids reading. And so we decided that with Sold a Story having come out, the time was right to, ask our district to make changes. And so we spent 2 years working on getting heard, and we got the district to form a committee and look at options. And so finally, and I guess that was December of 2024, the district chose 2 finalists for our new curriculum. Neither were what I wanted. I'm just going to be honest. But they are a step above what we were doing before. And I have decided that I'm going to look at this as we will be taking steps towards improving. And I think, like with everything that we do in our lives personally and, wherever, we take it one step at a time, and as we learn more and know more, we can do better and do better for the kids. And that's really what I want is, as I just want children to read. And in fact, when I ran for school board, that was my slogan: until all kids can read.
That's so cool. Do you feel like your experience with advocating for dyslexia just kind of gave you that confidence to run for school board? And
that's a really good question. And absolutely. And I will tell you, 10 years ago, me would not recognize me today. I flew under the radar. I didn't want to cause trouble. I just did whatever needed. I did the hard work in the background. It wasn't that I didn't want to be a leader, but I just thought I was more valuable as a worker bee. I could spend the time, do the work, be at the events and functions. And that was just not who I was. And, that seminal moment of my daughter getting off that bus, I realize now that was when I changed. I didn't realize that until I felt like I had enough knowledge to step out and start speaking and start advocating and start doing those bigger things. I realized, I spent several years preparing for that. And I mean, honestly, no, I never would have done anything like this. Like I no, and it's kind of wild when I think, like, this thing that I didn't know, never heard of, didn't understand, never expected, all of a sudden came out of nowhere and has totally changed my trajectory. And I mean, it blows my mind.
it's interesting that you said that, when your daughter came home and was, so upset, that was kind of when you changed. I imagine too, seeing her have the courage to speak in a government body like that must have also just been so inspiring to want to continue that effort that she's doing.
And you're right. And I think, it's funny, those kids inspired a lot of people when they went up to Austin, and every office that we knocked on every door more than once. I mean, we were up there at least 15 times, and every time we knocked on a door and talked to the staffers or talked to the legislator, somebody in that office said, "Oh, I have dyslexia," or, "Oh, my brother has dyslexia," or, "I think my uncle's dyslexic." Everybody can relate. Everybody has somebody they know, somebody they love that struggles with this. And I know people hate it when I say it as a negative, but it is a struggle. I mean, the truth of the matter is, school is not easy for these kids. School is not made for dyslexics. And everyone loves to talk about how dyslexia has gifts and, this and that. And when you're first starting out and all you see is the struggle, like it is very hard to think that there's a gift that has been given to your child. It just seems like it's a heaping helping of unfair. And so I think that as we've made it through some of those harder times, she's gotten to a good place. I still don't know that I think of it as a gift, but I do think that it has made her into a better version of the person, that she could have been. Because she's tough. She's strong. She's a hard worker. And she just does it all. And I'm so impressed.
I have a lot of thoughts about this, but also just about just being not neurotypical. So
Mhm.
kids with dyslexia, but kids who have ADHD, they just think differently, they learn differently, and sometimes their desire is to be like everyone else
Mhm.
because the system is built for everyone else.
Right, it is. And many of these kids have more than one. I mean, my daughter is dyslexic and has ADHD and has dysgraphia and a couple of other things, and
I would love to hear about that journey with your daughter through that. I think that's something that a lot of our listeners are dealing with, and it helps to hear other stories. So,
well, this is also one of the reasons that we ended up at the state capitol, because when my daughter was diagnosed, which, fortunately for us was a quick process, she was immediately put into services at the school. And of course, they're supposed to pull them, 4 times a week. They're supposed to give them, this, that, and the other. And, we found that unfortunately the dyslexia specialists were pretty overworked. They were getting pulled a lot for meetings and testing and conferences. And so she was getting a couple times a week, 2 to 3. We went through that whole first year. We didn't really feel like we had seen much progress. In third grade, oh, I forgot this. So initially, when she was tested under 504 law because that's how Texas did it. My next door neighbor is a first grade teacher, and she told me, go in there and ask for an IEP. And I said, okay, or an FIE, sorry. And I was like, I don't know what that is. So I walk in and I say, I want an FIE. And they say, well, it's not time for that yet. We'll, if we need that, we'll do that next. Okay, I didn't know. So we get diagnosed with dyslexia. We start getting services. They call me in January and say, hey, we need to have a meeting. And I said, that's fine, thinking I'm going to get an update on her progress. They're like, we want to do an FIE. And I was like, oh, you do now, huh? So 4 more diagnoses later, now she's in special ed and she's on an IEP and she's getting all these services and still getting her dyslexia, but we really just weren't seeing improvement. And we're at the end of third grade and we're getting closer to middle school, and I'm starting to feel stressed. Like she's got to be able to read before she goes to middle school. And of course, a lot of people like to say you up through second grade, you read to learn. And then you learn to read. And then from third grade, you read to learn. And so I didn't want to let that get too far down the road. So we actually ended up pulling her and finding a private school. And within 5 months, she could read. And has just absolutely blossomed there. Her first week, she said, Mom, all these kids are just like me. And she just was so happy that she didn't feel like the odd man out anymore. And I actually underestimated the value of that. I didn't realize how important that would be for her. And so she stayed for 2 years. We stayed all the way through COVID. And then it was time to go to 6th grade. And I said, okay, well, let's try public school again. And on the side, I told my husband, the first sign of anything going wrong, we're done. We're out. Like, I'm not doing this again. We can't backslide. And I'm proud to say that she's had all A's since she came back to public school. She's in 10th grade now, or 11th grade now. And she's had all A's. And I'm in awe of her every day. That first First 9 weeks back, she got the English award from her English teacher, and I did cry a lot because I don't even know if the English teacher knew how much that meant to this mom, who thought her kid was never gonna be able to read. So um it's been a journey.
That's so cool.
I love that story, and that the value of the right instruction is really key for our kiddos. I think um, being able to go to a school where they can support your daughter in the way that she needs to be supported with other kids who have that support
Right.
is great. And I don't know if you got to hear my story, but I had similar experiences where some schools didn't have the resources for my kids, but then when I found the right resources for my kids, they were able to flourish.
And-
So
Oh, go ahead. I'd just like to add what this really highlighted for me and why we ended up in Austin was because we were fortunate that we were able to pay for the services that we felt we needed. And not everybody pulls their kid out. Some of them just get tutoring after school. It was important to us that we did not take away any more of her day. So we found a school where that would happen during the school day. But what I realized was there's thousands of kids back in the district that don't have that ability. And they're not learning to read, they're not getting the help, and that's not okay. And so that's why when we were invited to join the Texas Dyslexia Coalition, I was like, yeah, let's do that. Let's go make a difference for somebody. And that's also why why I ran for school board. And, because I'm still committed to that. I understand Texas prisons have an 80% illiteracy rate among their population. They're not there because they want to be in prison. They're there because they didn't have any opportunities to go somewhere else and do something else and be something else. And we're letting these kids down when we're passing them through the system with no reading skills and giving them a diploma and saying good luck. They can't make it. We have to teach them to read.
So from there, what are your next steps? What are you hoping to accomplish now that you're on the school board and through some of these other activities?
Well, so it's hard because the school board takes up a lot of time. It takes a lot more time than most people realize. And so there's a lot of my time and energy that's put into that. I still am active in advocating for dyslexia and, now advocating for, teacher preparation. So really that's what's taking up all of my time right now, those three things. And of course I still have a daughter at home that needs her mom, and she plays a lot of water polo matches. we have a lot of games. And so, but really I think, I still want to continue to improve things in our district for children. And I still see areas how we can improve the dyslexia services. And really, I think to me that starts with educating the teachers. Most teachers come out of college not knowing anything about dyslexia. I'm not saying you need to be a dyslexia expert to teach first grade. I'm saying I need for you to understand what those kids look like and what they need and how you might be able to identify them and get them the help that they need. So that's one of the big pushes that I have made. And I actually started that before I got on the board, but that's one that I'm going to follow through with is we've got to make teachers. And I also think this is important at the high school level because I think a lot of people don't understand that dyslexia does not go away. It looks a little bit different when you get older, but you still struggle and you still might need extra time and you still might need extra help and you still might need things. And I think that unfortunately, a lot of teachers don't want to give that. They think that's babying the kids or giving them an advantage over other kids. And I would like for them to sit through that dyslexia simulation and realize it's not an advantage. They desperately need extra time because it's twice as hard for them to do the work.
For our listeners who want to help but aren't sure how, what steps can they take to raise awareness or advocate in their communities?
Well, I mean, I would say you could go look for some social pages on Facebook to maybe join in with, and I say Facebook because that's my platform that I use the most. I'm not very good at Instagram, but you can look on Instagram too. um, and, see if there's an effort already underway. Look and see if there are groups. Just do a search for dyslexia in your city or dyslexia your state, your school district, and see what is happening in terms of dyslexia. I know there's lots of pushes in lots of different states. And if you're more called towards literacy, do the same thing. There's so many states that are trying right now to improve the way kids are taught to read in school. And they're always looking for more people to help. If you don't see one, you can start your own. That's always an option. And really for me, I feel like the most important thing is getting the word out and educating people. The people whose children don't struggle don't even know that we're over here fighting this battle because they don't have to. And I was that mom. My older two sailed through school. I just assumed my daughter would be even easier because, I heard girls read earlier and were easier to potty train and all that stuff. And none of that was true. And so, I think that there's a lot of people who don't even know this exists, talking about it. And you don't have to like annoy everybody with it, but, just sharing about it. And for me, one of those ways was, if I saw somebody struggling somewhere, or I noticed something, I would talk to the parent and say, hey, I noticed that your child, da da da, have you thought that they, should be evaluated for dyslexia? And it would be somebody that I was friends with, not just a stranger. And there's a lot of people who would say, oh, I did notice that that didn't seem right, or I wasn't really sure what to make of that, and then I've had people come to me in 4th and 5th grade going, oh, they want to test my kid for dyslexia. And I'm like, now? Like, that should have happened years ago, and so I think just that's been my goal, especially with this Facebook group, is I want that group to be a place where people can come and ask answers or ask questions, get answers, feel safe doing so. And it runs the gamut. It can be help, we just got diagnosed. It can be, I'm looking for somebody to test. It can be, I've never even heard this word, but somebody mentioned my kid might have it. So there's all different levels of people that still need help out there.
Oh, how we can help each other. And I love that you have joined groups and you reach out to people. I find a lot of people, and maybe you've had this experience too, just coming to me because they know I have a child who has dyslexia.
Mhm.
They've been diagnosed, or their child's struggling to read, and they have all the questions.
Yeah.
And I love how you pointed out that we can find groups that have those answers. I love talking with people about it and sharing what I know because I was there. So I guess really for our last question, for parents just starting the journey, what's one piece of advice you wish someone had given you?
It's hard to say just one. I think my one would probably, and I know this is like the most overused thing ever, but trust your gut. And when you see that something isn't right with your child, don't let the school tell you to wait. Don't let the school tell you they'll catch up. Don't let the school tell you that it's going to be okay. Even if they're not dyslexic, it's still worth you pushing to get testing to make sure, because the earlier you start getting them help, the less effort that it's going to take for them to catch up to their peers.
I love that advice. That's great.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because I've heard Sandra say that. Yeah, like the worst advice is to wait and see. And
Well, and that's why I like talking to people, and truly, even before this group, everyone was like, go talk to Jennifer, go talk to Jennifer, go talk to Jennifer. And but I truly heard every single one of those things that people talk about. You don't need an FIE, just wait, she'll catch up, and the problem was, like, because of, I guess, the makeup of my daughter, it broke her. And it took us 3 years to repair the damage done by that one realization that she had that could have been avoided if we had paid attention earlier. And that's another thing that really fired me up is when I thought about it later, I realized they had known for a long time. I didn't know because I had no experience, but they had known that she had a problem and they had not addressed it, and they let it get to the point where she broke. And I was angry. I mean, I was very angry.
In the work that you're doing to advocate for better prepared teachers, I mean, one of the big barriers, I'm sure, is the budget of the district that you're working with, or the resources that they allocate for resources for kids that need additional help. What things have you encountered that are challenges that you can advocate to overcome? I mean, the budget is always top of mind, but
Yeah.
why do they push it when they know? I think is what I'm trying to get to the heart of the matter of.
Oh, that's a really complicated question. With a lot of things I learned in this legislative session, but I won't go into all that. So you're right, the budget. And in Texas, the budget is always the most important thing because the legislature controls the purse strings. They dole out the money that they want to the school districts. And so the school districts essentially have to prioritize what they're going to do. The other problem is that they give a lot of unfunded mandates. So they say, well, you have to have a police officer on every campus.
Who's paying for it?
Funding for it. And where are we going to find that? You know? And so sometimes things get sacrificed. I also think that dyslexia still has a ways to go to be fully understood for some reason, even though we know tons about it. And I think sometimes the people that are put over dyslexia may not have any prior experience. So they can't recognize when something is not working, something's not correct, or, it's not benefiting the kids. And like I said, hiring right now is hard. Diags and specialists are in high demand because of the change in the law, which is my fault. But regardless, and that's what I tell people. I'm like, I feel bad, but I don't feel guilty because this should have been this way for decades.
And one of my frustrations with that too is that we've had some of that structured literacy information we've had for decades as well.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, you look back at Orton Gillingham, that's that 1920s, 1930s. Why did we throw it out? I don't know. But
because everybody hated drill and kill. It needed to be, like warm and fuzzy. And I'm like, no, school's not warm and fuzzy. It's okay.
Yeah. And we know from research that they actually need the repetition.
Yes.
So it really isn't. I think the big problem was the way people were doing the repetition, like same thing over and over again. Whereas, using my educator can be really using senses and doing it in different ways, but introducing the same thing over and over again. It's not killing it, it's teaching it.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's an interesting time right now, and I don't know how far I'm going to get, with that because of the budget constraints. I mean, it's like that's all anybody talks about is budget, budget, budget. And I get it. Like I get it. We have limited funds, but I also would like to think we could cut some people out and make up some of those funds. But what do I know?
Well, and also
I just have hopes that now that we know more, we're going to do better. Hopefully. Like, I also find, I don't know if you found this too, there's a disjoint between the research, the people who've done the research and know what's working, and getting it into the classroom.
Yes.
Like we, all these people have done all this research. We know what works. We know what dyslexia is, but we don't have
the decision.
That was actually a big topic at the IDA conference in Dallas last October. Excuse me, sorry. Is they talked about that exact thing. Like we've got all these brilliant researchers who have brought us all this information and we're not getting it into the hands of teachers. Like we have got to bridge that gap and get all of the knowledge, funneled through whatever it is, down to the teachers.
Well, I feel like we could talk about this.
I know. Right?
This part especially is really fascinating to me. It also reminds me, Sandra's first experience. I think it was your first experience where you had a district psychologist to tell you that dyslexia wasn't real.
I just that's
It's insane.
But
Yeah.
now looking back, I realized she was taught
Mhm.
that. She
Yep.
was a lot older and had grown up.
I know we're at time now, so I want to wrap it up. I just want to say thank you for sharing your story, and I'm so impressed by, again, just the courage of your daughter. And I know you were talking about how it's hard for you to look at dyslexia as something that's a superpower. We like to coin that term here because we have some folks that look at it that way, but it is a little bit to me, because what you've done is you've turned it into something that is massively impacting your community and other kids and parents who are facing the same challenge. That's really impressive, because you could have easily just not solved it, but received the tools, or reached out and been able to get the tools for your daughter that you needed, and then moved on. But I love to hear stories like this. So thank you for.
And I agree with you. And when I was saying that out loud, and I was listing all the amazing ways that it has changed her, and made her stronger and tougher, and I realize those have been some gifts. I do still, you know, she doesn't have I don't know, maybe she has the gift of creative thinking, or whatever everybody says. Those big wholesale like gifts, like I'm not. I think it's taken a smaller form, but still not less important, but just not as, big scale as a lot of people like to talk about.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well,
Yeah.
one thing I found, just my own personal thing, I think with it is that school wasn't made for dyslexic kids, but once they get out into the world, I have seen the things that they can do because of how they are and their brains and what they've had to overcome. And so I think that is where I I look to the future for them.
Yeah.
Like, because I think that's where, if we can get them the help that they need, then that future is so bright. And
Well, and that's a good point. I mean, and that's the thing. And do not tell her brothers I said this. I think she's smarter than they are. And they both got into UT, and they're like really good, really smart. But I think she's smarter. But she was never going to get there if we didn't teach her to learn how to read, And the fact that I mean, she's gotten all A's. She got a 5 on her world history AP exam this summer. I'm like, what? Well, yeah. Somebody, just like it just gives me chills. I'm like, she couldn't even read. Like, I never thought we'd be here. Like, I just, this was just like passing was going to be good enough for me, which is terrible because that's selling her short. But, I knew how smart she was, but I didn't know how much she'd be able to handle, because again, it's not made for these kids. And so, and she's frustrated still. One thing that you should look into, and I should have given you this name earlier. I don't know if you know Sarah Blodgett. She's in Connecticut. She has invented this thing called Noah Text, and you just would find it very interesting. She gave me a book at our symposium this summer, and it's Noah, like her son's name, Noah, and then text. It was so weird. This is one of those like chills thing. So we had gone over my daughter's summer reading list. We had like, it was terrible. Like half the books are about kids, parents with cancer. And, I was like, like who wants to read this? And the one she wanted to read was The Life of Frederick Douglass. And I was like, okay, fine. That seems like the least, horrible on here. And so I went to this conference, and she's like, oh, here, I want you to take one of my books and, see what you think. And I'm like, okay, like whatever you're talking about. And one of them was The Life of Frederick Douglass. And I was like, what are the chances that you would have this book? It was very weird. So I was like, okay, I'll take it. So I gave it to my daughter, and I was like, tell me what you think. Because if you look it up, you'll see it's weird. Um, she highlights the words, like breaks them down using like bold and underline, like they underline the long vowels. And anyway, to me, I'm like, this looks chaotic. And at first she was like, it's kind of weird. And then, she got towards the end, and I was like, so what do you think about it now, now that you've been using it? And she's like, I really like it. She goes, I find I'm not skipping words anymore. And I was like, that's weird. And she goes, this must be what it feels like when normal people read. And I was like, oh my God, like, are you trying to kill me? And so now she's reading the Scarlet Letter, or yeah. And so I ordered the book from them in Noah text because I'm like, let's see, let's do it again. And so I was very skeptical, but she really likes it. And I was like, well, then we'll do it again. So I'll let you know. But but I just I'm sort of interesting. Yeah, it's pretty cool. They just released with a joint venture with oh my gosh, why can't I think of what it's called? Oh, hold on, I'll just look up what she told me. And so so you can translate any book, and like professors can translate their lectures and all kinds of, I mean, there's all kinds of cool things that you can do. Adaptive Reader is what it's called. It's an app, I guess. And so but you can get any book as an ebook, any book you want as an ebook, or order it in print. And so I downloaded the ebook for her. It's free, but I ordered the print one. So like, but that takes a couple weeks to come in. So we'll see how it goes. But I at first I was like, okay, yeah, I'll look at your book, and then I was like, maybe there's something to this. So, and they have like a Chrome extension, so you can translate your Chrome, your Google Chrome website to read it that way. And I think it's intended to be a scaffold, like when you're first learning to read and getting to those bigger words and whatever. But I mean, I don't know if she likes it, I'll let her do it. I don't care.
That's so
I'm
cool.
interested. I wonder if they chunk the words in ways that they can read them by syllables and things.
Yes, that's it. That's what it is. So this is
That could be very assistive when you're learning.
yeah, this is
Also, after you've learned, just make it a little easier too.
right. Well, and that's the thing. And so this is my experience. I have zero teaching background. I'm just a mom. Like I did real estate for Exxon for a little while, like, and so I don't have the educational background that a lot of people in this world have, but I do have pushiness.
Oh, well, that's kind of the most important one when we're talking about this.
We need it all.
Yeah. So I mean, so we can advocate about like becoming more of like an actual advocate, like getting certified, like learning the law, that kind of thing. But I think right now I still have some stuff that I need to do here. So maybe after my daughter's gone, and I don't know, we'll see. They've gone to college.
It sounds like you've got a very full plate right now anyway.
And I also plan Disney for people. I know.
Oh, you do. That's so cool. I'm a big Disney nerd.
Oh, I love Disney. I'm going to Disneyland in November, so I'm excited. But it's just funny. I'm like, oh, that job I have? Yeah, we'll get around to that later.
Well, I mean, I feel like in this space, you really do need parents who have experienced, that have firsthand experience. Sandra knows this. I mean, I'm in education. I work in education, but I feel a little bit like an imposter in this space because my personal experience isn't related to dyslexia. It's related to neurodivergence. 'Cause I have ADHD, but yeah, your perspective and the work that you've done to help your kiddo is so important for other parents to have access to, because that's how you avoid that delay that you were talking about, that you could have avoided all of that heartache. And it's unfortunate that there's a lot of parents that don't have access. They don't either have time or financial resources to get their kids everything they need, but they're just having another mom who's been through it and can give them the best advice is really the most important thing that can help them. So,
and it's hard when people, when people reach out to you and you try and they still go a different way. And I'm like, oh, I really wish you had gone the other way. But I mean, all I can do is offer the advice. They have to take it.
Yeah, that's the story of my life as a mom. Yeah. Anyway, I know we're over time, so I appreciate you spending this with us. I really hope, again, thank you for joining us and sharing your story. It's so powerful. I hope this inspires others that are listening, that you don't have to be an expert to make a difference. And you just have to be willing to take the first step and ask the right questions, and you can be the same kind of advocate that Jennifer is. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us for another story in Apricot Tree Academy's Dyslexia Awareness Month podcast series. We hope today's conversation helped you feel seen, inspired, and reminded that no family is alone on this journey. Every story shared brings us one step closer to better understanding, better support, and brighter futures for children with dyslexia. If you'd like to learn more about how to support your child at home, visit apricottreeacademy.com for free resources, parent guides, and our dyslexia intervention curriculum designed especially for families. And if this episode resonated with you, please share it with another parent or educator who could use some encouragement today. Together, we can raise awareness, change perceptions, and empower every child to reach their full potential.